Hi, I'm Lydia Rackham, and I'm doing a series on different prayers in the Bible, individual prayers in the Bible, and just starting at the beginning and working our way through. And so last time we talked about the prayer that the servant made to make sure that he got the right wife for Isaac and the perfect timing that had to happen because of that prayer there. So now we are on to actually it's a really short prayer by Isaac. So we are in, let's see, where is it? Genesis 25, and it's literally one verse. So Isaac has married Rebekah and he loves her, and he's comforted after the death of his mother. And so what this verse says is, Isaac prayed for his wife Rebekah to have children. Isaac prayed to the Lord on behalf of his wife because she was barren. The Lord answered his prayer, and his wife Rebekah became pregnant. Okay, so that's Isaac prayed to the Lord on behalf of his wife because she was barren. The Lord answered his prayer, and his wife Rebekah became pregnant. First of all, I just have to say that Isaac is one of my favorite guys in the Bible, because for like a little kind of a simple reason. He only has one wife and no concubines. That's rare in the Old Testament, for a man only to have one wife and no concubines. It's kind of like, let's see, Moses, Joseph, Samson's dad, Adam. We don't really know a lot about like Adam's sons and how many wives they had. But mostly, I mean, when you get down to eventually like David and Solomon, it gets really ridiculous. And even with Abraham, there were too many women. And with Jacob, it's like, stop. But Isaac only had one wife and no concubines. And as far as I have been able to find out, you can check me on this, check and let me know if I don't think that any other husband prays on behalf of his wife in the Bible. Like specifically, prayed on behalf of his wife. I think that Isaac's the only man to pray for his wife that we have recorded. Now, there's probably, of course, men who prayed for their wives. I'm sure that Joseph prayed for Mary every day and vice versa. But it's not recorded. But this is just really, I think this is really interesting, and kind of, we can just blow past this. This is another one of those that we could just blow past. Isaac prayed to the Lord on behalf of his wife because she was barren. The Lord answered his prayer, and his wife Rebekah became pregnant. Now, Isaac is the son of the promise, and Abraham would have told him all his life what a miraculous thing his birth was, and here's the reason for it: that Abraham was going to be made into a great nation through Isaac. And so, of course, Isaac is expecting to have children. He's just expecting to have children because that's the next part of and besides which, he's like, well, if my dad and mom had me when they were 90 and 100, when I'm a young man and my wife is young, this should be easy. And so here's what I am gleaning from this. Isaac took it for granted that he was going to have children with Rebekah. He just expected it because of the relationship that God had with his father, Abraham. So he was married and was like, and then they're trying and nothing is happening. Nothing is happening. But he expected it though. He just expected it. Like, here, kids, we're going to have kids. We're going to have kids, especially sons. We're going to have sons. And nothing was happening. And we know, because we know the character of God, that God always keeps his promises. And so Isaac was going to have kids. Isaac and Rebekah were going to have kids. But depending upon their willingness to accept the promise for themselves, that was going to see how long that was going to take. So I guess that's my point. Isaac had to accept the promise for himself and for his wife. And he had to start establishing his own relationship with God, not relying on his father's relationship with God in order to claim the promise. So God wasn't saying, no, you won't have children. But I believe he was withholding that for a time to see if Isaac would come to him and ask. That's all he had to do. I mean, obviously, it said the Lord answered his prayer and his wife, Rebekah, became pregnant. So you can see God's hand in that. You can see his point. I am not going to keep going with this promise until I have established your personal faith in me, not Abraham's faith. You can't live off of your parents' faith or your grandparents' faith or your whole family's faith. Just because, Abraham, I believe, was still alive. I'm not sure if he was or not. He might not have been. But I know that Abraham was praying all through Isaac's growing up for children. And so, but God didn't listen to those prayers. He wanted Isaac to realize, okay, if I am to inherit the promise, then I must also exercise my father's faith. I must also believe that he will do what he said he's going to do for me. And I must establish communication with this God who's made this promise. Because it doesn't say before that Isaac had any kind of relationship with God. It didn't say that he prayed or did anything. I'm sure he did the ritual things like a sacrifice like you're supposed to do, like they thought they were supposed to do. This is before the law, but Abraham was doing those kinds of things. So this is the moment, even as an adult. I mean, Isaac's grown up. He was 40 when he got married. So it's not a matter of age. Like, your spiritual maturity doesn't have anything to do with your physical age. So he had to claim it for himself and come and ask, and of course, believe. If you don't believe that God is for you, that he is on your side, that you are on the same team, then you can't get your prayers answered. If you think that you are arguing with God or fighting him, then you're not seeing him right. You're not seeing him rightly. It's not his problem. It's yours in a perception problem. And it's a hard thing to get over. If something has happened and you're really needing your prayers answered, and like it's a desperate situation, and you're thinking to yourself, God put me in this situation, if you think that God put you in this bad situation, then you already have an antagonistic view toward him. And that is incorrect. So you have to have a good opinion of God. You have to have a good opinion of him and know that when you come to him, he will answer you. Especially if it's something that he has already promised, And all the promises in the Old Testament, of prosperity and goodness and all this stuff, all of those belong to us now as Christians. We own and claim all of those promises because Paul said so. So everything that Abraham was promised is also promised to us. So you can feel free to ask God for those things because he has promised it, and he always does what he promises. And Isaac needed to be put in a situation where he realizes that he can't do it. He can't do it alone. He and his wife can try, as natural people can try to have children. But if God does not cause her to conceive, she will not. And that's kind of a theme that runs throughout the Bible. God is always the one who causes someone to become pregnant because he's the one who creates the life that is in that womb. That life that is put in the womb has a whole destiny attached to it. So there is no such thing as an accidental pregnancy. If God didn't want that pregnancy to happen, if he did not want that child to exist in the world, that child would not. So now everybody has free will once they're born, obviously, but he has a plan for them. And if they will tune in to him and that plan, then that would be his will. Kind of off on a sidetrack there. But God is in control of when someone gets pregnant. And so Isaac had to come to a point where he was like, I can't do this alone. I can't do it. Can't do it. I took it for granted that this promise was going to come to be. So I just was rolling with it and, whatever, and expecting it. And then when it didn't happen, he suddenly realized his own personal need for God, that he needed to lean completely on God, that he had done everything that he could think of to do, and it wasn't working. And so he needed divine intervention. He needed to make that promise personal. He needed to establish a relationship for himself with God. And when he did, God answered. The Lord answered his prayer, and his wife Rebecca became pregnant. She became pregnant with Esau and Jacob. Big deal people that we'll talk about later. So when things seem to be delayed in your life and you've come to a point where you can't do it yourself, it is very possible that God, though he did not necessarily make the bad thing happen to you, he is watching to see what you will do. Will you come to him or not? Will you ask him for help or not? Will you acknowledge to him that you can't do it and he's the only one who can do it? Will you establish a personal relationship with him apart from your family, apart from your mentors, apart from your church, just you and him, intimate relationship? Will you do that? Or how long will it take you? How many more things have to happen? How many more years have to pass? Because he can do it and he will do it. And it doesn't matter to him like it wouldn't matter if Isaac and Rebecca were 100 years old. He could do it. Obviously, he could bring the child. But what a waste of time for Isaac and Rebecca. How sad that they would miss out on the childhood of, like really, because they would be so old. Wouldn't it be better to have the children when you're young? So the obedience will spur on God's answer to your prayer. Obedience and leaning upon him and realizing you can't do it, but he sure can, and he will. That's something you kind of have to keep in your mind all the time. He can and he will. Just keep repeating that to yourself. He can and he will. He can and he will. And it doesn't matter how impossible it looks. It doesn't matter how impossible it looks to you. God can do it. He can do anything. So I think that's what we draw from this brief little prayer. It's pretty powerful. Kind of put yourself in Isaac's shoes right there. Like, how long did they try? How long? I mean, I know there are people out there who are struggling with infertility, and they know exactly how this feels. It's like, well, we're doing everything. We're adjusting our hot or cold with how we sleep, and taking vitamins, and all of these things. And it's just like we have reached the end of what we know how to do. We need God. We need God. So sometimes he brings us to that point. I can't do it. I need God. Realize it sooner rather than later. Go to him first as opposed to as a last resort. Isaac, I think, kind of did. And thankfully, Isaac didn't wait for 50 years. He eventually did go and pray and ask and claimed it for himself. So that's what we all have to do. We're no different than Isaac. Go and ask and know that he can do it.